Welcome to Predator in Plain Sight, exposing Tom Girardi. I'm Chris Hansen, and along with Tom Girardi legal victim advocate Kimberly Archie, we have the very latest on this very compelling trial. Kimberly, good to see you.
Nice to see you too, Chris.
You've been at the courthouse from the very beginning when this trial started. And of course, in previous episodes of this podcast, we talked about the very compelling nature of this. Tom Girardi, the apex of practicing law in California for so many years, the estranged husband of Real Housewives star Erika Jayne. And now he's on trial for stealing client money, client funds in some very high profile cases. Bring us up to date on what's happened in the trial so far.
Well, so far, I think, one of the most important things we've seen is Tom. And how is Tom behaving, and how, what's he doing in the courtroom and out of the courtroom. So far, we've seen him take a lot of notes and follow along with everything and go along with, what I would consider, social norms. And we've also heard him direct his attorneys. And it's been reported in the news and also amongst, people that were there that he made the comment that he was there, like his lawyers weren't there. I was there. Something along the lines of, don't do this to me. And the response was, okay, sir, from his attorney. So it's interesting to see somebody who claimed to be incompetent, and to see not one, not two, but three of his lawyers sign declarations that were filed with the courts that he is incompetent and unable to assist in his defense.
Well, that's the interesting part of this, is that his lawyers tried to plead diminished capacity, that he was not with it, that he could not help his lawyers, and he didn't commit any crimes here. He was taken advantage of by his CFO, but the judge didn't buy any of that. And based upon what you're saying, Kimberly, that he has been taking an active role in his defense. So what does that say about this argument that he's not with it, that he's intellectually incompetent to stand trial?
It's almost comical at this point. And I think the best way to, sum it up is when he's walking in and out of the courtroom, or the courthouse, he's smiling at the cameras and kind of acting like he's, out of it and doesn't know that it's inappropriate to be smiling at everyone. It's somewhat of almost a joke. If it wasn't so serious for the victims, and it isn't so serious for how long the system has allowed him to do this, it would be funny.
He's accused of stealing millions of dollars that should have gone to his clients who suffered physical and emotional damage in some of these big time cases. The witnesses have started to take the stand, including the Ruigomezes, Joe and Kathy. Give me a sense for their testimony and how damning this has been, especially when it comes to Joe, who suffered burns, and these physical injuries are very apparent with him.
Yeah, so Joe Ruigomez was the first witness to take the stand in the trial. And as people have heard in the podcast previously, Joe's girlfriend died in the gas explosion that he was in. He had third-degree burns over 90% of his body. And, it's been 14 years since that happened. So I think for, Joe and Kathy, this has been a long time coming, and probably they're in shock that the day finally came for Tom to be held accountable. It's hard to get a sense of how people really perceived Joe's testimony, besides being just in awe of, what had happened. Their case is really complicated and was drawn out over 14 years. And the defense crossed Joe for more than 90 minutes, which I think we were all pretty surprised. for them to cross-examine Joe for such a length of time, and to ask him all these really detailed questions about, what happened with the money, when obviously Joe was having more than over 30 surgeries during a lot of the time that these questions would be referring to. So it was a lot of like cat and mouse and just trying to confuse the jury. I call it throwing up. So you just like ask all these questions and go in a circle and throw out numbers and information. And hopefully you either just, overwhelm them or put them to sleep.
Kimberly, you actually worked with, as our listeners probably know by now, with Tom Girardi and saw how he operates. Given what you know about this case and what you know about the victims who you are now an advocate for, how do you rate what Girardi's defense lawyers have been doing to these prosecution witnesses?
Well, I would say that I don't think it's going to be effective. What we've seen so far from the defense is that the bookkeeper did it. And I heard you say CFO, which is proper. Everyone's calling Chris Camone the CFO of Girardi Keese. But I never even talked to Chris Camone. In all the years I worked with Girardi and Girardi Keese, I never had to deal with Chris to get paid or anything like that. He wasn't that key of a player. So for the defense to try to sell that, this super controlling, narcissistic, huge personality, huge presence, was being controlled by his bookkeeper is sort of preposterous, really.
And we should remind people that Chris Camone is facing criminal charges, but will face trial separately from Tom Girardi.
Right. Just before the trial, they severed Chris and Tom. But we will hear about Chris throughout the trial because they are allowing some evidence in about Chris Camone stealing and his side fraud. But, we have 5 women and 7 men on the jury. One of them is a cop and one of them is a teacher. These are salt of the earth type jurors that, are smart. And they're going to see through the defense's argument that Tom was taken advantage of by Chris Camone and his partners, and this sort of like bizarre tale they're trying to tell of Tom being the victim.
These victims who are testifying now, the Ruigomezes, and there are more to come, they will also take the jury inside of the excuses that Tom Girardi was giving his clients as to why they were not getting paid. And at the end of the day, when you take a look at these excuses, and I want you to talk about that for a minute, they just don't make sense. They don't hold up to the common sense test.
I think that's a great point, Chris. And I think that's exactly how the jury is going to be listening to these voicemails or emails that Tom, is giving to his victims about why they're not receiving their money. And for example, so after Joe and Kathy testify, then Judy Selberg testified, who's another victim. And, one of the things that was told to her is that he's trying to deal with some taxes that, relate to her being taxed because she's a woman. And a junior, young lawyer who had just passed the bar not too long before worked on Judy Selberg's case. And she also testified after Judy. And she said, I knew there wasn't going to be any tax issues for somebody because of their gender. The IRS code would never allow that, right? So his lies were just even outrageous. They weren't even believable at that point.
It's hard to believe, but it's true, according to this testimony, that Tom Girardi thought these excuses would fly, that he could tell a junior lawyer in the firm, and that junior lawyer being Alexa Galloway, that there are different tax structures for men and women, when we know that these settlements aren't taxed anyway. Most of them.
Yeah, regardless of gender.
Regardless of gender, they're not taxed. So he really had to be digging deep in these cases and desperate to cover his tracks. I mean, the jury's got to see right through that. The clients certainly did, Kimberly.
I think so. And I think that especially after they hear all four cases, the victim stories are all different, but they're also all the same. You see the patterns from victim to victim of the things that he did over and over. And I think that between seeing the similarities between his excuses with each client and knowing that he gave $25 million to Erika during this time, what's the jury going to say about that? And people have to understand these are 4 counts of wire fraud. So while we're discussing the victims, their stories and how they come across, at the end of the day, what are the jury instructions and what is Tom being convicted of? Did they believe, one of the counts is that there was $4 million, wired into the Girardi Keys trust account for victim Erika Saldana and her family. And and Tom and Chris Camone spent that money and wasn't properly given to the victim. So, one of the counts is literally, do you see that and believe that or not? It's really a papers case, in my opinion. It's really a bank accounts.
Yeah, it's a financial records case. And that's why it's wire fraud, because they can show that this money never got to where it was supposed to be. Talk about Judy Selberg for a minute, Kimberly. How important was her testimony?
Judy was really the star this week, I got to say, and her dog, her support dog that she brought to the court. Everyone loved Judy. She's a retired college administrator. She was a very no nonsense, person. And, we just heard nothing but praises for Judy's testimony and how much sense she made and how clear she did not allow the defense to make her case complicated, or that is what we heard from a number of people that were watching in the courtroom during her testimony.
And how did the jury try to dirty up Judy Selberg's testimony?
They really couldn't. I mean, again, back to the same tactics of, trying to make things sound complicated. When really it's just as cut and dry. Again, Judy's count, same thing. $504,400 was wired into their bank account and Judy didn't get the money. One of the funny parts of her testimony is when she said, I had to hire a lawyer for the lawyer. And it was just the way she said it. It's ridiculous. Like when you hire a lawyer, you're supposed to be able to trust them. To have to go out and hire another lawyer to deal with the lawyer because he's not doing what he's supposed to do. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
It's too bad we can't get cameras in there, but because it's federal court, obviously we cannot. But what is Tom Girardi's demeanor? What is he doing as the Ruigomezes and Judy Selberg are testifying? Does he react at all? Do we see any emotion whatsoever?
I haven't heard anybody describe Tom as having a lot of emotion, but it has been said that he looked down a lot during Joe Ruigomez's testimony. And while, Joe had a suit on and long sleeves, his scars are really apparent. Both of his feet were dropped from being in a induced coma for so long to heal from his burns. So when he walks, it's obvious he has difficulty walking and he has burns on his face. So, Joe was one of the 4 victims that it's obvious that he went through something horrific, physically, as well as mentally and emotionally. And, when it came to Kathy Ruigomez during her testimony, Tom didn't do a whole lot. But when Kathy went in to watch the trial after she testified, someone saw him locking eyes with her and just staring her down, almost like he was angry at her.
We talked about the junior lawyer who worked on these cases with Tom Girardi, Alexa Galloway. Her testimony is pretty critical here too, because after hearing from, 3 of these victims, then Alexa Galloway takes us inside the law firm, inside what was being said. And she heard firsthand these cockamamie excuses. I mean, with no plausible, truthful explanation to back them up, that he was giving. And it paints the picture, or it appears to paint the picture, of a man who's very desperate, who may know that all this is going to come crashing down, and he's treading water to keep this money and to keep the clients at bay. Is that accurate, Kimberly?
Yeah, it is accurate. And I would also add that, one of the important things with Alexa's testimony is she showed what all of us who dealt with Tom knew. If you push back at him at all, if you don't go along with what he's saying, or you're not approaching him in pretty much only you get more with honey than you do vinegar approach, he's going to flip out on you. He's going to yell at you. He hung up on Alexa when she tried to stand up for Judy. He yelled at her and screamed at her. And that was the type of behavior that you would see from Tom if you just didn't go along with them. And I think that is a little bit of a window for people who say, why didn't people, immediately react to not getting their money? They were afraid, or what were they going to do? Look at his excuses he was using. The guy felt like he could say anything and just get away with it because he was that powerful. I think that it's hard for people to grasp how powerful Tom Girardi was at the top of his game.
Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. What about, tell me a little bit about Josie's testimony. Now, she started, but just barely got going.
Right. So Josie just took the stand maybe 15 minutes, and she'll start tomorrow morning. First up will be Josie's testimony next. And, I think that, like Judy Selberg's case, it happened towards the end in 2020. Her case is fairly simple. There was a wire sent for $128,500 to the firm, and Josie didn't receive it. So again, like Judy Selberg and Saldanha's, in 2020, as things were blowing up, money came into the account and was not given to the victims. It was spent to keep the firm going.
And is there any indication that Erika Jayne will be called, that she'll have any role in this trial whatsoever? It doesn't thus far, does it?
No, she's not going to have any role in the trial other than the $25 million that'll be discussed that was given to her company and given to her. And it's funny, her lawyers have sent out all these written statements to all the media, trying to make it very clear that she hasn't been charged with any crimes, and that, that her companies didn't just receive money, that her vendors, sent invoices to the law firm directly, like as if, we can just write off the fact that, so Erika thought it was okay for the law firm to pay for her makeup artists. Like, she had to know that that wasn't right. Even if she didn't know what the specific law was that it was breaking, or, what the business practices should have been. It's ridiculous for her lawyers to make it sound like, she's just so innocent.
And it was clear that money from the law firm was propping up her company.
So clear that the judge is allowing it as evidence. So I think it's crystal clear, really. And they could try to muddy it all they want. One of the interesting things about, in connection to Erika is, we've seen the story about the designer Marco that was in Housewife and the Hustler too. And Chris, who's the owner of Marco, came on the first day of trial to support the victims of Tom Girardi. And I thought that said a lot about him. That was very classy of him to, come and support the victims. And it makes, it visible that, these people are intertwined, Tom and Erika. They were married. They filed taxes together. And, whatever the power dynamics were between Tom and Erika, at the end of the day, she benefited from it. And she wants to, both of them were claiming to be victims. What's the irony in that? Tom and Erika both say they're victims in all of this.
What do we expect to see this coming week?
So I think we'll see more of victim testimony. I think we'll see both Josie Hernandez and Erika Saldana testify. I think we'll also see Judy Selberg's lawyer for the lawyer guy. His name's Eric. He'll testify this week. Also on the witness list that I think could be this week would be Erin Scarpa, who was like an Alexa Galloway. She's a young lawyer who just passed the bar when she started working at Girardi Peace, and she worked on Josie Hernandez's case, and she'll testify. So we'll get another peek into the inside of the law firm and what was being told to these young lawyers and how they felt being in the middle of Tom's crimes.
And we discussed this earlier, Kimberly, about you potentially testifying in this trial. What is the latest on that?
So I wasn't called by the prosecution. So I was released to testify on the prosecution side. I was served an improper subpoena by Girardi's daughter last week, but there was no date on it. And the date of the subpoena was the next day, not the day that they served me. So it's just really weird. They want to keep me out of the courtroom. If I'm on the witness list, I can't come in. And I think Tom's used to being able to do whatever he wants and get away with it. And if they really could call me to the stand, I'm certain that, the judge would see it proper that I'm not in to watch the witnesses, testimony. But I think they were just doing it to try to keep me out of the courtroom. And I just don't even take it serious at all. I mean, to be served by Girardi's daughter standing in front of the courtroom with a subpoena that isn't even filled out properly, how would I appear if I don't know what day it is?
Well, it seems kind of schlocky in a way, like a gimmicky thing to try to keep you from being in the courtroom.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that, it's going to be a rude awakening for them that they can't just push people around.
All right. So we expect a lot of drama this coming week, and we will report on it all right here on this podcast. Anything else that we should expect this coming week, Kimberly?
I think we've covered most of it, and it'll be interesting to see if we have any theatrical moments, or if we see more from Tom, or if we see another outburst like we did in the competency hearing where Tom said, fuck you to the prosecutor right in front of the judge. It'll be interesting to see if he can keep his cool for a second week of testimony, making him look bad. And I think we'll hear Josie Hernandez has a number of powerful voicemails showing Tom's lies. And I'm sure that the prosecution's going to play at least one, if not more. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in response to those voicemails.
The tale of the tape, and a lot of financial records to go with it. Kimberly Archie, thank you as always. I appreciate it.
Yes, good seeing you.
I'm Chris Hansen, and we'll be together on the next episode of Predator in Plain Sight, exposing Tom Girardi.